Scriptural reading, 2 Corinthians 12, verses 1 through 6. Verse 1. I must go on boasting, though there is nothing to be gained by it. I will go on to visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that this man was caught up into paradise. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And he heard things that cannot be told, which man may not utter. On behalf of this, I will boast, but not on my own behalf I will not boast, except of my weaknesses. Though if I should wish to boast, I would not be a fool, for I would be speaking the truth, but I refrain from it, so that no one may think more of me than he sees in me or hears from me.
So what happens when we give people this false hope, a false prophecy, a false teaching, put them further into bondage?
We had known this guy, started a graveyard ministry. Families live in these graveyards.
They're looked down on because they're living among the spirits.
But then the next statement, she goes, did you sing to those solo cups? And I did sing to those solo cups on my way out your front door. I get 5 seconds. And she said, so there is a plant about 3 inches tall in each solo cup.
Sir, you died this morning at about 9 a.m. This is 5:30 p.m. You didn't just die, you died hours ago.
Tales of Glory presents Experiencing Jesus in Mystical Prayer with Reverend Michael Norton. Michael is a spiritual warfare and inner healing minister in the San Francisco Bay Area. His spiritual warfare experience with exorcism, deliverance, and spiritual afflictions has taken him to many countries. Michael also works in inner healing with severe trauma. His expertise spans 25 years of ministry. For the past 25 years, Michael has worked with training the religious, seminary, counselors, and lay people whom have benefited from his equipping. He is also the author of A Field Guide to Spiritual Warfare, A Field Guide to Advanced Spiritual Warfare, and the most recent Cosmology and Demonology in Genesis 1 through 11. In this Tales of Glory series of study workshops, Michael will focus on the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila and her masterpiece on deep prayer life with Jesus, The Interior Castle. I am your host, Michael Norton. Let's explore 6 mansions. We're diving deep into Book 6 of The Interior Castle, Chapter 4, in the mystical, supernatural heart of the Interior Castle prayer life. Saint Teresa explains her experiences with raptures from Jesus. Welcome, Tales of Glory listeners. I'd like to welcome back my 3 listeners and a dog. It's great to have you guys back. It's great to be back in the company of the TOG family here today. I've been getting comments from a lot of you guys from all over about what all y'all is experiencing here. It's been kind of cool. What I love about this is what I intended Tales of Glory to be, the podcast, back when I started about 152 episodes ago. I believe we started it back in 2019, maybe. It was just prior to COVID, when COVID ramped up. And the biggest intention was I want to start Tales of Glory to be a place, to be a safe haven, a safe harbor where we could share testimonies and miracles about Jesus Christ that we were experiencing. And not just stuff that was on Sid Roth, right? In fact, some of the stuff on Sid Roth now I wouldn't have on because I don't believe the authenticity of some of this stuff because we're just trying to crank it out. But here on Tales of Glory, we go through the authenticity filter to make sure these miracles we talk about are well vetted from you guys, and we talk about spiritual direction from some of you guys who are experiencing the supernatural stuff. And some of you guys are just getting started too, which is cool. So we've been working with, like I said, all y'all out there on all different edges of the spectrum, whether from beginners in the first mansion stepping in, all the way to people having 6th and 7th mansion experiences. So yeah, this is what Tales of Glory was intended to be. It wasn't intended to be a podcast where we start talking about, there's the Isaiah Salvador's and the Russ Lons, or all those guys out there. They have their different shows. This wasn't meant to be a show like that where we just present stuff. It was stuff to present true, authentic miracles that were happening out there in the supernatural. So, like I said, I'm honored to have you guys. I know we're not a big audience. I'm not here for the likes. I'm not here for the algorithm. And probably sooner or later, when YouTube changes their algorithm again, goes, hey, Mike, you've been well below a lot of this stuff. They'll probably cancel us or toss us somewhere and we'll surface somewhere else. Like I said, we're on Spotify, Rumble, YouTube. We're everywhere. Apple Podcasts. So it's going to be hard to put out this flame, but we're out there. We're out there, guys. And it's because you guys keep coming back. All 3 listeners and the 3 dogs, man. I appreciate you guys. Speaking of 3 dogs, my producer, my oldest dog, man, she gave me a scare yesterday. She's getting up there. She's about 15 years old. And she usually all perky when I get up in the morning, comes excited, comes and gets me. And I always have to give her a treat in the morning. That's her big thing. When she wakes up, hey, give me a treat. And yesterday she wasn't budging out of her little doggy bed. I call it her charger, her cordless recharger. She goes to sleep. That's my security alarm, her cordless recharger for my security alarm. She goes and barks at the door. But her other buddy was up and running around. It's like, oh my gosh, I hope this isn't the big day where she goes to meet Jesus. We don't have Tales of Glory experience with her meeting Jesus, but she bounced back today. Thank God. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you for having her bounce back. Anyway, like I said, I digress. And this is the place where we share authentic tales of Glory. This is where I wanted this to be. And we're slowly building up that momentum. After 152 episodes in so many years, right? We're slowly building it up. But some of you guys have been with me for a while. And like I said, it's been an honor. It's been an honor. And I want to keep producing material that you guys are interested in. That's why we're going through the mansions. And for me, the mansions had a purpose because I was addressing a major issue in deliverance ministry. That the people getting into deliverance ministry, the people starting the podcast, listening to podcasts and feeding off each other, didn't really have an understanding of deliverance ministry or the supernatural. And it's turned into something horrible that's feeding a customer base, a consumer, so to speak, on these podcasts and Instagrams and social medias. And my intention was here to clean stuff up a lot. A lot of you have been picking up on it. And my biggest thing was to go through the interior castle to show you guys the stages of prayer, which are necessary for the person to be involved consistently in deliverance, prayer, and exorcism. And I think the light bulb's going on now. Gosh, Mike, that once we start in the 6 mansions, we start understanding, okay, now I know what you're talking about, right? We talked about locutions. Locutions come from demons. When you have somebody saying, help, deliver me, I'm listening to demons. Well, we all hear from demons. That's their job, to come beat up on us. But to what degree are they consistently getting locutions from demons and so forth? So we see that. That's 6 mansions, chapter 3. We'll talk about stages of prayer where it affects us, the minister, where we can go through a horrible trial and just go through aridity, or we're going through a dark spiritual battle. Is Jesus still there with us? How do we know? How do we know Jesus is real? You better know Jesus is real, and you better have a relationship with him by the time you go into this deliverance ministry stuff. I tried to stress that in one class I taught a few years back, and I kept getting these blank stares at me. Just shut up, Mike. Tell us about how to drive out demons. But I kept saying, if you guys want to be a church that drives out demons, you have to be at this level of prayer. And I don't think they liked the fact I was pointing out that they weren't at that level of prayer to take this on. And in fact, their deliverance thing after I left did collapse because of that. That and a few other issues, but that was a major one. That they thought just worshiping, having terrific worship every Sunday and stuff was all they needed to cast out demons. It's not true. Demons work 7/24. So it's cool. So you guys get this, light bulb goes on, right? This is where we have to be for spiritual warfare. We have to be operating the 6 mansions. We're getting there. And I don't see necessarily there because it's, like I said, if you're working on it, you're working on your prayer life, you're consistent, you're in the 4th mansions on up, you're probably in a safe spot. Even the 3rd mansion's crossing over the 4th. You have a consistent prayer life, and you have to start understanding the supernatural, what it looks like. It's more than just binding this, binding that. Because you get in a deal when you're dealing with the occult and exorcism, these things can follow you home. They can follow you home. You got to deal with it at home. So you have to have the understanding. It's a light bulb going on. Is this why we're going through this? I know some of you guys been on for the ride. You guys get it. It's like, this is the meat you wanted. So that's why we're sharing this stuff, and that's why we're here, and that's why we spent so much time to understand this. Because I also know some of you guys are in spiritual warfare. I'm not calling it deliverance ministry anymore, because whatever the heck's going on in these churches, or these guys running around with their Indiana Jones hats, I saw a giant in the jungle, or I had this demon manifest when I was in Saudi Arabia. No, really? Who doesn't? But it's getting, I'm mocking them right now because it's getting so bad. I had a visitation last night and they told me I'd take on the Leviathan. Like, you even know what a Leviathan is. Why are you taking on Leviathan? And it's just, guys, I'm prepping you. You're going to be the real warriors. You're going to shake your heads, get angry. I mean, if you sat in this seat I was in right now, listen to some of the phone calls I dealt with on botched deliverances and how deliverance ministers yelled at people for having a voice they didn't think was an adult coming out of the person. Or if somebody was forced into a baptism suddenly because they didn't agree with their lifestyle and didn't tend to disciple a person, lead them out of it. I have horror story after horror story. And I have people I could talk to who went out and they were shaking in their cars. They went from out the car, talked to deliverance minister because what the last person did to them. And it was from a local big person out here who has a podcast. He's very popular across the United States. Turn them off. Turn these people off. Turn them off. Don't go to their $900 conferences. Don't go see their movies where the people throw up in their popcorn because of demons. Don't do it. Don't do it. It's all a farce. I'm sure if Jesus was here, he'd start throwing over tables. He'd be mad. He'd form that whip, start lashing at him. That's what it's turned into, guys. We want the real deal. We're here for authenticity. I said, I'm not here for a million likes. If I ever see a million likes, I'll probably pass out. Or it means something happened. Something went wrong, or right, the algorithm went crazy. But I'm just here for the minor feedback. I hope I'm not digressing, guys, but that's why we're here. That's why we're going through the 6 mansions, because we have to understand the supernatural, whether it's in spiritual warfare or our own interior prayer development. This is why it's important. Spiritual direction, guys. We don't hear this anywhere else. And Saint Teresa of Avila, she was on top of it. Man, we're going to have some conversation when I meet her in heaven. Shake her hand, It's probably after my 2-year-long embrace with Jesus, or however long it takes while I'm up there with him. Cool stuff. So we are in 6 Mansions, chapter 4. And St. Teresa writes at the header, treats of occasion when God suspends a soul in prayer by means of rapture, or ecstasy, or trance. I think these are all the same, and of how great courage is necessary if we are to receive these great favors from His Majesty. We are studying Raptures. I'm not talking about the raptures that failed to happen back here in September of 2025. See, guys, it just keeps happening. Now we have social media. The sewage spigot is bigger than Netflix. It's from our own church, and we got to learn to shut it down and how to take control of it, because we need to monitor this. We need to have things under control as we step into the end times. We're already in the end times. Our church brethren. What do we do with them? What do? We got to educate them. I had a dream last night. That was the one I sent to my friend. In late August, this person posted a dream on YouTube. I see Jesus coming back in September, and then after that, some more stuff started spilling out. It was from the same person, another person, about raptures happening, and which is interesting because we're going to learn about what raptures really are today. What are they really? And we're not talking about the type where we're going to float up to heaven. This is something different. Let's dive in. So what will St. Teresa be discussing in the 6 Mansions, chapter 4? Well, to give us a very thorough explanation, I'm going to dive into Dennis Billy's book, the book we usually use, the spiritual commentary. So it's Interior Castle, the classic text of the spiritual commentary, classics with a commentary, he writes in his book. In this chapter, Teresa speaks of the different kinds of rapture one might experience in the state of betrothal. Remember, right now we're in a state of betrothal. Well, we're ready, our soul's all out. It's in a deep prayer life that we're all in for Jesus. And Jesus goes, hey, I'm all in for you, but you're not quite there yet. So we're in this betrothal stage where you get cleaned up with trials and other supernatural stuff happens. But some cool supernatural gifts happening during the stage of betrothal. And we're going to discuss this. Let's continue with Dennis Billy. A person needs great courage for these experiences, since human nature is very weak and needs God's help to bear them. Rapture, also known as ecstasy or trance, occurs when the experience of the Lord is so intense that the soul seems to be carried out of the senses. Teresa is quick to point out that she is talking only about genuine raptures and not the kind due to a person's weak disposition. She knows she has written about these experiences elsewhere, but she finds value in repeating herself a little so that everything can be found in one place. And again, I'm quoting the introduction to Six Mansions, Chapter 4, out of Dennis Billy's book, Interior Castle, the classic text with a spiritual commentary. And if you go to A Field Guide to Spiritual Warfare.blogspot.com, I'll have a hyperlink to this book. And if you're following along the series, I know most all of you already have this book. Excellent book. By the way, I found another one. I need to put in the comments or what. I found another book that has The Interior Castle, Life, I think Way of Perfection, all translated into modern English. What, Mike? What? I found it. I got it on my Kindle. But it's also available on Amazon. But I will put it out there because it was so cool to have this. But after going through this so much now, it was like I've just been using that for leisure reading. But I may also post some quotes from Life out of the modern translation because it might be easier to read if I use some of those. So let's continue. This is exciting, guys. I tell you, it's just things just keep happening. We're in a good place here. So let's lead us to this question. What is a rapture? Is it where we get sucked up to heaven because Jesus was supposed to return back in 2025? Oh my gosh. Mike, you should be mocking that. I'm not mocking it. I believe something supernatural will happen when Jesus returns. I'm not totally bought in about rapture. I think that topic came in about the 1800s. But before that, there was an actual term rapture, and we're talking about this right now. That has been around since, I don't know, God knows how long. We read about it early on too. So Paul talked about a rapture. He raptured up in the third heaven, right? He was pulled up. And we're talking about what this looks like and how this happened. And Saint Teresa is going to explain this for us. So let's invite in the scholar on Saint Teresa of Avila, Dr. Anthony Lills, to tell us about what raptures are. He is the man. In fact, he's over here near me, like 2 hours away. I need to go out and talk with him one day. Sit down. I've been wanting to do it, but I'm trying to figure out which topic I want to save up on. Maybe towards the end of the Six Mansions, I do have a conversation with him and check in with him. So Dr. Lills provided an eloquent description on episode 21 of the Discerning Hearts podcast on the Six Mansions, chapter 4. So citing Dr. Lills, he defines raptures. Here we go. There's something like rapture. It's more like, she says, it's closer to absorption that has happened to her early in her book. She talked earlier about the prayer of quiet. And this prayer is a little bit more appropriate for the fourth dwelling places, and we talked about it at that time. In this, as the Lord brings you into a great stillness of your heart, there's like a little flash, a little spark. And that one little spark of his love does more for you than all the meditation up to that time. It is just a delightful moment of God's love. But you might say probably a difference would be that the beginning experience was more to purify your affectivity and how your body relates to your spirit. And so it had a lot more to do with St. John of the Cross would call the purification or the reordering of your senses in relation to prayer. Here you're dealing with graces that John of the Cross would say are about the transforming and healing, the harmonizing of your spiritual faculties, your imagination, your intellect, right? And she say these experiences of rapture are so different that she wants to call the earlier experiences that you have the prayer of quiet, she wants to call that more like an absorption. And there's different kinds of things that might absorb you. But these kind of raptures that she's talking about, and some of those things that might absorb you might be of God, and some of them might not be. So when she's talking about this experience in the prayer of quiet, she meant the experience that you have that God produces. Remember, the prayer of quiet comes from God. It comes in stages, right? In Fourth Mansions. Supernatural recollection, and then the prayer of quiet, where it's just quiet and still. And here too, she's talking about experiences that God produces, but there are experiences that can happen in your imagination and your intellect. And so she'll talk about an imaginative vision, and she'll talk about an intellectual vision. And the difference, so you're enraptured, and it means you're not very aware of your body anymore. And you're not very aware of your surroundings. You're not very aware of yourself for that matter. Your whole attention is caught up in a holy glory of God, God's presence. Teresa of Avila believes that this presence of God, this heavenly presence, isn't something remote from you. It's not like you physically leave your body to go to this other place. This heavenly presence is within you because God is in you and he dwells in this heavenly presence. So you're pulled into yourself. This is me talking now. I'm not quoting Dr. Lills II. The experience is you're not being pulled out of your body. You're being pulled deeper into your body, very close to the seventh mansions where God dwells, okay? And so your faculties lose sense of the body when it's pulled in. Back to him. And what he's doing is he's inviting you to go deeper into the deeper truth of who you are, where his glory is, and so you can encounter it. This is from Discerning's Heart, episode 21 on the Six Mansions, chapter 4, The Interior Castle, with Dr. Anthony Lills. Anything he talks about or writes about, I mean, he's got some good stuff. He's gone through all her books, I think, over on Discerning Hearts, which are fun to listen to his commentaries on them. I usually do. They're very edifying, very good stuff. So it's this, summarize. A six mansions rapture is when Jesus draws a soul in close to him, the seventh mansions. The soul loses its sense of connection or awareness to the body during this experience. Saint Teresa describes this as trance-like. During this grace from Jesus, the imagination and intellect may experience a vision. Again, she says it's trance-like. It's not a trance. I keep warning about the new mystics out there who are training people to go into trances. If you're a mystic, you do not position your mind and your cognizance into experiencing something, because that's not what mystical experience is. You are just praying and you developed a relationship. It's not positioning your mind for a psychological experience. It's not. That's what a trance is. We're taking shrooms, all these other people now. I'm seeing ashwanda, all these guys taking, they're seeing demons. That is a trance. And again, if we practice trances, we could also position ourselves, even if think we're talking to Jesus, we can position ourselves to talk to demons or have demonic oppression from trances. So that's not our goal here. Our goal is to position our listening equipment, the imagination, the intellect, to be ready to receive an experience, identify it when it comes in, not to go into prayer and go to where these experiences happen. We don't do that. So I hope that makes sense. A trance is we're positioning our mind for a psychological experience, and this is not good. That is not good. That's also more like mindfulness, right? Mindfulness, the big buzzword right now. We don't practice mindfulness. We don't practice Christian meditation. We meditate on the Word. So while meditating on the Word, these experiences can happen or go into a trance-like state. It's not a trance. It's a rapture. Got to learn our nomenclature, right? So very important. Again, a rapture is a six mansions grace. What does grace mean? That it only comes from Jesus during prayer. We do not pray and try to put our mind into a mental state. That's what I was just talking about earlier, right? As the New Apostolic Reform, the new mystics falsely teach, the latter opens your minds to demonic oppression. Is what it is, guys. These people think they're having these little fantastic, fits and ecstasies that they're forcing their mind state into. It's either the fancy or something, they're allowing something demonic in now. Okay, let's take a look at Six Mansions, chapter 4. Again, I have put this together in Mike's outline. This outline is not something that appears in any of the books. What I try to do is, as I go through each chapter, I try to break it down to topics, I think, where she's shifting or transitioning gears into some other topic or some other discussion. So I tried to break it down. Here, I think I identified 7 discussions. I'm not an English major. Remember, I worked in computational physics, quantum physics. This whole English thing is outside my nature. So based on when I think her thoughts shifted to something different or focused somewhere else, I broke it out into a new outline. So this is Mike's outline for chapter 4. There are 7 topics. 1, courage for the soul and raptures. 2, one particular kind of rapture. 3, understanding the experience. 4, enraptured in an intellectual vision. 5, seek the bridegroom. 6, the soul's experience during ecstasy. 7, Teresa experiences her ecstasy in public. Those are the 7 topic headers I pulled out of this. This is Mike's doing. It's not in the books. And each one of these topics corresponds to different number systems like we had last time. And we went through chapter 2. Okay, so the Benedictine brothers who translated the Discerning Hearts version of Six Mansions, they broke down, I don't want to say it's like Bible verses, not, but they call them numbers. So it's like 22 verses or 22 numbers in the Six Mansions chapter 4 they identified. And so with 22 paragraphs, I have to break this up into 2 episodes. So this can be part 1 today. Part 1 is going to cover my topic outlines of 1 through 4, and part 2 will cover topic outlines 5 through 7. That gives us about 13 verses to go through in part 1. And that's how we're going to attack this. Let's go. Chapter 4 outline, the section roadmap for topic 1. Remember, so this is Roman numeral 1 in my outline. Courage of the soul and raptures. And this covers numbers 1 through 2. These are akin to verses like in the Bible, but this isn't a Bible. It's just a numbering system they use to identify the paragraphs. You look, some of these are numbered. I also numbered them for you in these sections too. So numbers 1 through 2, the first one's courage required by the soul for the divine espousal. And number 2 is raptures. Let's dive in. Let's start this thing. Six Mansions chapter 4, the interior castle. Let's begin. Again, number 1, courage required by the soul for divine espousals. How much rest could this poor little butterfly have amid all these trials and other things that I have described? Its whole will is set on desiring to have an ever-increasing fruition of its spouse. And His Majesty, knowing our weakness, continues to grant it the things it wants, and many more, so that it may have the courage to achieve union with so great a Lord and to take Him for a spouse. You will laugh at my saying this and call it ridiculous. We will all think courage is quite unnecessary and suppose there is no woman, however lowly, who would not be brave enough to betroth herself to the king. This would be so, I think, with an earthly king, but for betrothal with the King of Heaven, I must warn you that there is more need of courage than you would imagine. Because our nature is very timid and lowly for so great an undertaking, and I am certain that, unless God granted us this strength, it would be impossible. And now you're going to see what His Majesty does to confirm this betrothal. For this, as I understand it, is what happens when He bestows raptures, which carry the soul out of its senses. For if, while still in possession of its senses, the soul saw that it was so near to such great majesty, it might perhaps be unable to remain alive. It must be understood that I am referring to genuine raptures, and not to women's weaknesses, which we all have in life, so we are apt to think everything is rapture and ecstasy. And, as I believe I have said, there are some people who have such poor constitutions that one experience of the prayer of quiet kills them. Commentary 1. Saint Teresa opens her romantic at heart prose on how a woman of lower social status dares to find the courage to marry a king, or for that matter, the King of Heaven. She says that without a doubt, finding this courage will be impossible without these graces from Jesus to help her along in this stage of spiritual betrothal. In the Benedictine translation of number 1, it states that Jesus ratifies these espousals and ravishes the soul with ecstasies, depriving the soul of its faculties and pulling the soul in closer to Him. Teresa reflects back to an experience she documented in her book Life. Chapter 39, number 30, she writes, "These words of our Lord and the consolation He gives me fill me with the utmost shame. When I remember what I am, I have said it before, I think, and I still say now then to my confessor, that it requires greater courage to receive these graces than to endure the heaviest trials. When they come, I forget, as it were, all I have done, and there is nothing before me but a picture of my wretchedness. And my understanding can make no reflection. This also seems to me at times to be supernatural." Saint Teresa ends number 1 with a comment on the prayer of quiet from the fourth mansions, interior castle. And we're reading from Mansions 4, chapter 3, number 11. She writes, "You, my sisters, are free from such dangers. As far as we can tell, God keep you from pride and vainglory. The devil sometimes offers counterfeits of the graces I have mentioned. This can easily be detected, the effects being exactly contrary to those of the genuine ones. Although I have spoken of it elsewhere, I wish to warn you here of a special danger to which those who practice prayer are subject, particularly women, whose weakness of constitution makes them more liable to such mistakes, on account of their penances, prayers, and vigils, or even merely because of the debility of health. Some persons cannot receive spiritual consolation without being overcome by it. On feeling any interior joy, their bodies being languid and weak, they fall into a slumber. They call it spiritual sleep, which is a more advanced stage of what I have described. They think the soul shares in it as well as the body, and abandon themselves to a sort of intoxication. The more they lose self-control, the more do their feelings get possession of them, because the frame becomes more feeble. They fancy this as a trance and call it one, but I call it nonsense. It does nothing but waste their time and injure their health." Number 2, raptures. I want to enumerate here some different kinds of rapture, which I have got to know about through conversations with spiritual people. I am not sure if I shall succeed in doing this so, any more than when I wrote of this before. For various reasons, been thought immaterial if I should repeat myself in discussing this and other matters connected with it, if for no other object than that of setting down in one place all that there is to be said about each mansion. Commentary 2. Saint Teresa states that she has explained raptures elsewhere. She's referring to her work in Life, chapter 20, numbers 3 through 5, where she writes, "A rapture is absolutely irresistible, whilst union, inasmuch as we are then on our own ground, may be hindered through that resistance be painful and violent. It is, however, almost always impossible. But rapture, for the most part, is irresistible. It comes, in general, as a shock, quick and sharp, before you can collect your thoughts. Or help yourself in any way, and you see and feel it as a cloud or a strong eagle rising upwards and carrying you on its wings. I repeat it, you feel and see yourself carried away. You know not whither, for though we feel how delicious it is, yet the weakness of our nature makes us afraid at first. And we require a much more resolute and courageous spirit than in the previous states, in order to risk everything, come what may, and to abandon ourselves into the hands of God. And go willingly whither we are carried, seeing that we must be carried away, however painful it may be, and so trying is it that I would very often resist and exert all my strength. Particularly at those times when the rapture was coming on me in public. I did so too very often when I was alone, because I was afraid of delusions. Occasionally, I was able, by great efforts, to make a slight resistance. But afterwards, I was worn out, like a person who had been contending with a strong giant. At other times, it was impossible to resist at all. My soul was carried away, and almost always my head with it. I had no power over it, and now and then the whole body as well, and so that it was lifted up from the ground. This has not happened to me often. Once, however, it took place when we were all together in choir, and I, on my knees, on the point of communicating. It was a very sore distress to me, for I thought it was a most extraordinary thing, and was afraid it would occasion much talk. So I commanded the nuns, for it happened after I was made prioress, never to speak of it. But at other times, the moment I felt that our Lord was about to repeat the act, and once, in particular during a sermon, it was the feast of our house, some great ladies being present. I threw myself on the ground, then the nuns came around me to hold me, but still the rapture was observed. Chapter 4 outline. For topic number 2 in my outline is number 2 in my outline header, Roman numeral 2. One particular kind of rapture. And this covers numbers 3 through 6. We have number 3, rapture caused by the spark of love. Number 4, the powers and senses absorbed. Number 5, mysteries revealed during ecstasies. Number 6, these mysteries are unspeakable. So let's dive into number 3, rapture caused by the spark of love. One kind of rapture is this. The soul, though not actually engaged in prayer, is struck by some word which it either remembers or hears spoken by God. His Majesty is moved with compassion at having seen the soul suffering so long through its yearnings for him, and seems to be causing the spark of which we have already spoken to grow within it, so that, like the phoenix, it catches fire and springs into new life. One may piously believe that the sins of such a soul are pardoned, assuming that it is in the proper disposition and has used the means of grace as the Church teaches. When it is thus cleansed, God unites it with himself in a way that none can understand save it and he. And even the soul itself does not understand this in such a way that as to be able to speak of it afterward, though it is not deprived of the interior senses. For it is not like one who suffers a swoon or paroxysm, so that it can understand nothing either within itself or without. Commentary 3. Saint Teresa, again, the ever so romantic, uses her prose to describe why Jesus may grant the soul a rapture ecstasy. For this particular rapture, she says that she was not in prayer when this occurred. Teresa explains, metaphorically, she felt a spark, which caught fire inside her. Like a phoenix, she says. She rose to a new life, where she thought she had been cleansed and her sins forgiven. During this experience, she felt Jesus join his soul to hers. Afterward, the soul is left with certainty of what occurred, but unable to offer any explanation of the experience. She says this is not a swoon, which is a partial loss of consciousness, or an emotional outburst. Number 4, the powers and senses absorbed. The position in this case, as I understand it, is that the soul has never before been so fully awake to the things of God, or had such light or so much knowledge of his majesty. This may seem impossible, because if the faculties are so completely absorbed that we might describe them as dead, the senses are so as well, how can the soul be said to understand this secret? I cannot say, nor perhaps can any creature, but only the Creator himself. Nor can I speak of many other things that happen in this state. I mean these two mansions, for this and the last might be fused in one. There is no closed door to separate the one from the other. As, however, there are things in the latter mansion that are not shown in those who have not yet reached it. I have thought it best to separate them. Commentary 4. Teresa elaborates on the experience of a rapture. She says when this grace occurs, the soul has never been so awake to the reality of God and the supernatural light this experience brings. In this rapture, the faculties and the senses are completely absorbed, but the body does lose consciousness. The intellect is absorbed, and Jesus reveals his mysteries in a supernatural way of knowing. 5. Mysteries revealed during ecstasies. When the soul is in the state of suspension and the Lord sees fit to reveal it to its certain mysteries, such as heavenly things and imaginary visions, it is able subsequently to describe these. They are so deeply impressed upon the memory that they can never again be forgotten. But when they are intellectual visions, they cannot be so described. For at these times come visions of so sublime a kind that it is not fitting for those who live on earth to understand them in such a way that they can describe them. Although after regaining possession of their senses, they can often describe many of these intellectual visions. It may be that some of you do not understand what is meant by a vision, especially by an intellectual vision. I shall explain this in due course, as I have been commanded to do so by him who has authority over me. And although it may seem irrelevant, there may possibly be souls who will find it helpful. Commentary 5. As a soul is in a state of suspension, Jesus reveals mysteries to it. She says heavenly things and imaginary visions. One of the characteristics of the imaginary vision from his experience is that the information from it can be recalled and is deeply ingrained in memory, so it can never be forgotten. So what she's talking about here, she's talking about two different forms of visions, and she's going to talk about more in I believe, Six Mansions, chapter 7, which talks about visions again. An imaginary vision is when we see the movie play out inside our head. God plants something inside our head and we see something. It plays out. And that's an imaginary vision. And because it was supernatural, we can recall it years and years later. An intellectual vision is where we don't see anything with our eyes or with our imagination, but we can feel the presence of something. Or an intellectual vision, we have a deep knowing where, say, for instance, we're supposed to get in a car and go somewhere, and all of a sudden we feel this word say, no, don't get in the car yet. It's not words, it's not nothing. It was like an intellectual, it was just implanted there. It came from deep, like, wow, this is weird. What's going on? Maybe I'll wait 5 minutes. You found out later, you waited 5 minutes, and you missed a car accident. Okay, it's things like that. That would be an intellectual vision. There's no pictures, no words. But the imaginary vision, there's pictures and words, and it plays out like a movie. I have an example of one here. Let's get through this part. The intellectual vision is different because it is so sublime. The experience or the information gained is usually challenging to put into words. However, after the experience, the soul may be able to articulate the intellectual vision to some degree. So I want to go through and review what is imaginary vision. I had an interesting one that was like a rapture, like she's talking about here, and it came with an intellectual vision. Excuse me, an imaginary vision. So something was played out. So years and years ago, probably like 2006, 2007, my wife and I went to a prophetic conference or something. And that was back when we were trying to come up to speed on the Holy Spirit, because we were in the Assembly of God Church. And we're like, oh, what is this stuff? We're knee deep in this storm of supernatural experiences stuff going on. What's going on? So part of our education, we went to this prophetic conference. I think it was, if you guys are in Bay Area, it was at Jubilee Church, and they always have prophetic conferences. You'd have like Bill Johnson, these guys come down, and I think, I can't remember who the rest of the people were. But during this talk, they had breakout sessions where you go have, get prophetic ministry done. And I was kind of new to that. And ironically, we went to this one breakout room, and the woman leading this breakout was, ironically, had the same name as my wife, Lisa, and she had the same last name as her maiden name. And we thought, oh, it's kind of cool. It's interesting. We'll listen up here. And I can't remember what this other Lisa prophetically said over me, the words she spoke. I can't remember it all, because there's what happened. When she spoke it, she was speaking to us that we weren't telling anybody. We're trying to figure out, we're supposed to leave the church that we're currently at and go work with Night Strike Ministry with Bob Johnson. And we're cutting through this. We're trying to figure out this thing out, because, you know, it would causing chaos in our lives and everything else. Like, well, you know, what do we do? It was stressful, right? So we leave the church we've been at for over 20 years, raised our kids there, got married there. And of course, this other Lisa says, hey, you know, you're supposed to leave your church and you're supposed to be working in a homeless ministry in San Francisco. Like, what? You know, we never met. Sometimes I poo-poo prophetic ministry, but, you know, some people who are working it, and this is back in a time where we had checks and balances and mentorship and stuff. So this was delivered head on. And when she said that, I went into a rapture. I've never experienced anything like this before, where Mike checked out. And I'm sitting there going, what the heck's going on here? And all of a sudden, my, in this vision, like in heaven with angels flying around and stuff, like, what is going on? And I walked over and talked to Jesus during this imaginary vision. He was piping stuff in. We went to this place of, you know, many mansions, many rooms. He walked me over to a room that was supposed to be mine. He like knocked on the wall, and the wall had like this, it was like the Bat Cave or something, armory. It came out with swords and stuff. And Jesus hands me a sword and he goes, this one was forged in heaven for you for the spiritual battles you're going to take on. And they handed it to me. And when I came out of the vision, there was like angels as far as I could see. And God goes, Jesus says, don't worry about this. These guys are going to back you up. And it was like armies and armies of divine spiritual warriors. As far as I could see, it was crazy. And then when I came out of this imaginary vision, I was no longer sitting in my chair. I was on the floor. And I got up and I was like embarrassed, like, what the heck just happened? And the other Lisa was kind of laughing. And my wife's going, oh, you know, he got something. You know, something happened. But that was my experience of rapture. Where all my faculties, my senses were taken up and absorbed into what Jesus was showing me. And I no longer had control or sense of my body. So my body just kind of went limp, and when it went limp, it fell out of the chair. And when I came to, it wasn't like you're waking up like, whoa, whoa, whoa. No, you're all of a sudden you're back. Like, what the heck was that? And I never had an experience like that before. And I never knew that God could do that sort of thing. And so I was kind of like, what on earth? What just happened? But it was our confirmation there that we were supposed to leave the current church we were at and go work with Night Strike and go help Bob Johnson at that time start a new church, what he had the gate or what was going on over there in the city. So that was our divine confirmation to leave our church and go. So that was my rapture moment. And it was, yeah, you check out. Everything is like it's hard to explain, right? Articulate. It's like your reality is suddenly shifted into this imaginary vision. You're inside it and working with it. And you're talking to Jesus. You're seeing all these angels and stuff. Like, what is going on? This is crazy. So that was a rapture situation where my senses, everything were taken up into it. I no longer had sense of my body, which is why I fell out of the chair and woke up on the floor like, hey. So it's interesting that Jesus can do that and sort of things happen. I don't call that slain in the spirit. I just think that was a rapture experience because it had the checkpoints, everything she's talking about here, where I lost sense of the faculties and I was caught up in this powerful, imaginary vision, and I can totally recall it. This was like, this is like 2007. We're at 2025 and I'm talking about this now, and I still remember it. So it was a fascination or a fancy. I would not remember it, but I remember this and the impactful. I remember coming up the floor. It was crazy. So yeah, this is what she's talking about. They're difficult to articulate, but they're amazing. 6. These mysteries are unspeakable. But you will say to me, if the soul is not going to remember these sublime favors the Lord grants it in this state, how can they bring it any profit? Oh, daughters, the profit is so great that it cannot be exaggerated. For, although one cannot describe these favors, they are clearly imprinted in the very depths of the soul, and they are never forgotten. But, you will say next, if the soul retains no image of them, and the faculties are unable to understand them, how can they be remembered? This too is more than I can understand, but I know that certain truths concerning the greatness of God remain so firmly in the soul that even had it not faith, which will tell it who he is and that it is bound to believe him to be God, the soul would adore him as much from that very moment, just as Jacob adored him when he saw the ladder. He must of course have learned other secrets than he could not describe, for if he had not had more interior light, he would not have understood such great mysteries merely from seeing a ladder on which angels were descending and ascending. I do not know if I am right in what I am saying, for although I have heard of the incident, I am not sure if I remember it correctly. Commentary 6. Saint Teresa addresses the topic of what profit is it to the soul to experience an intellectual vision if the memory doesn't retain it, and the intellect is at a loss to describe it. Right? Profit do we get from that? How are intellectual visions remembered? Remember, this is where you experience it. It's not an imaginary vision, it's intellectual. You feel it, you experience it, but you're not seeing it with the mind, you're not seeing it into the intellectual vision. It's sublime, but there's a confidence and a certitude. Like I was talking about, when I was 11 years old, I had the intellectual vision of Jesus in that church, the Basilica of the Immaculate Mary, whatever it was, in Washington, D.C. To this day, I can recall, there was nothing there, but I remember the experience and my body or senses picking up who was there and something was there. So somewhere deep in my spirit, the interior part of the soul, these visions and their accompanying mysteries are retained and they're held there. And the reality of getting attacked by demons, because they have to use more physical stuff against you as well as mental and as well as supernatural, they can't seem to crack that one. They can't crack that intellectual vision, because a lot of times I'm under severe attack, I'm in fetus position with Jesus. We're locked down, like, here they come, we're being bombarded, and I'm locked in with Jesus. And they're trying to talk me out of my faith, right? Jesus isn't real. Who's this guy with me right here? Tell me that. Like, oh, okay. Well, he's not real. It's your imagination. Then what about this? And they can't tear apart the graces If they're real graces, they're not from the fancy, they cannot tear apart the graces that Jesus has given you. And that's what you pull up and use during a spiritual clash against the demonic. It usually happens you're dealing with the occult or something like that. That very rarely happens with deliverance ministry. But it happens a lot of times during exorcisms, or a lot of times when I'm dealing with going to new systems or ritual abuse survivors and stuff, I'll see something like that. Now moving into topic 3 of Mike's chapter outline. Roman numeral 3, understanding the experience, and this covers numbers 7 through 10. So number 7, Moses in the burning bush. Number 8, Simile of the museum. Number 9, Saint Teresa's visit to the Duchess of Alva. Number 10, joy of the soul during raptures. Number 7, Moses and the burning bush. Moses, again, could not describe all that he saw in the bush, but only as much as God willed him to. Yet, if God had not revealed secret things to his soul in such a way as to make him sure of their truth, so that he should know and believe him to be God, he would not have taken upon himself so many and such arduous labors. Amid the thorns of that bush, he must have learned marvelous things, for it was these things that gave him courage to do what he did for the people of Israel. Therefore, sisters, we must not seek out reasons for understanding the hidden things of God, rather believing as we do in his great power. We must clearly realize that it is impossible for worms like ourselves, with our limited powers, to understand his greatness. Let us give him hearty praise for being pleased to allow us to understand some part of it. Commentary 7. Saint Teresa uses the example of Moses in the burning bush from Exodus 3, verses 1 through 6. She uses this event from the Torah to explain mystical graces and how Jesus speaks to us. Imagine how difficult it must have been for Moses to articulate this to his family and the elders. Yeah, you go up on the hill, you see a burning bush, go, hey, it says I'm God, right? And most of you know, if you're following Tales of Glory and you follow us back with all the stuff we've been doing with divine spiritual counsel and all this stuff, you by now know that burning bush that was speaking to Moses was in fact angel of the Lord, Jesus. It was a pre-incarnate Jesus speaking to him. Moses had an exterior vision, right? Exterior, he physically saw it with his eyes, where he interacted with the burning bush. At the same time, Jesus had to impart to Moses some divine revelation that he placed deep within the interior of his soul. So now, Jesus and Moses are having this interaction, they're talking, but Moses, at the same time, because he's dealing with Jesus, he's talking to him, Jesus is giving his download. It's a divine revelation is playing deep into his soul, and it's going to be impactful for Moses for what the chore he has to coming up very soon about speaking before Moses and doing the miracles with his brother Aaron. The combination of these two experiences, along with the burning bush and Jesus, gave Moses the courage to undertake the spiritual mission of setting the captives free. Right? Something deep and powerful had to inspire Moses at the level, which had to be actual, and that gave Moses the certitude that he was going to go up before Pharaoh. Hey, we're taking the Israelites and we're out of here, guy. Deal with it. This grace from Jesus was the spark that lit a fire in Moses' heart. And we're talking about sparks now, right? It lit a spark. It set him on fire. Have you ever had the Holy Spirit light your keister on fire? That's the way I say it. That's the PG way of saying it. Yeah. Fire in your heart. Have you ever had your, like I said, have your keister lit on fire? Like, oh my gosh, I'm on fire for the Lord. What happened? That happened to me back in 2005, I believe, before I joined Night Strike. Jesus set me on fire, and the church thought, what's wrong with Mike? Why is he different? Why is he suddenly on fire? You know, what conference did he go to? Well, I didn't go to any conferences. I always poo-pooed them. I still kind of do, but Jesus set the conference up in my house. That's what he did. So like I said, I've experienced having my keister light on fire, and it's just amazing. And do you remember your spark? Many times we have these testimonies where, you know, this is where I encountered Jesus. I was at the kids' summer camp or something and encountered Jesus. What if you're raised in a church? We don't have these experiences because we're raised up with Jesus, knowing he's real. But although we could have this aridity and dryness where we're not really where we're supposed to be, so that's kind of like our Jesus moment experience equivalent, right? Where Jesus came and met us going, hey, you're not where I need you to be. Kind of just lights your heart on fire with a spark. So if you had this experience, how did Jesus light your keister on fire and awaken you? Go ahead and share with us in your comments below. Yep, share away, guys. This stuff's getting interesting. And I'm very flattered that you guys are having the confidence now. Like I said, this is what the Tales of Glory was supposed to be, to share your experiences and what's going on, what's happening. Whether it's good or bad or whatever, this is where we're at, man, to share the information, get the real information out, and disseminate and help each other. Right on. So yeah, share those comments. Number 8, simile of the museum. Let us put it like this, however. You enter a private apartment in the place of a great king or lord. I think they call it a cameron. Well, they have an infinite variety of glassware and earthenware and all kinds of things set out in such a way that you can see almost all of them as you enter. Commentary 8. A cameron is a shrine or chapel located above and behind the altar in a mid-1500s Spanish Catholic church. So she talks about a cameron a lot, right? These relics or these things are stored, or there's treasures stored. These chapels venerate sacred images of the Catholic Church, and many times, since it's Catholic Church, of course, they're going to have Jesus or Mary to be venerated in these. Here, Saint Teresa points out that the term cameron may also have been applied to the wealthy of our time, where the cameron was their treasury for the rich, where she describes it as a personal treasury. And the Duchess of Alva, she said she was required to stay there for some time at her house, and she had this cameron at her house where she had all her wealth stored up in the mansion, right? The worldly mansion of wealth. And St. Teresa says it was impressive, but like I said, there was so much stuff there, she couldn't remember what all it was. And this was her analogy, how she's going to lead us to when Jesus leads us into the 7th mansion, his cameron. How do we remember all the little stuff we see, all the treasures? It's hard. It's hard to recall it all. We could vaguely remember it, but not all of it. So again, St. Teresa uses the metaphor of cameron to describe what it is like when Jesus draws us in deep to him with these raptures. The soul gets a glimpse of the spiritual treasures and the mysteries stored up in him, inside our 7th mansions where he dwells. Some of them were unspoken words. Some of them were just revelation given to us. It's like, wow, what was that about? I don't remember God telling me about this or speaking to me about this, but suddenly I have this revelation, and I know it came from that ecstasy or rapture experience I was having with Jesus at that moment, because I didn't have it before. It got loaded on board. Number 9, Saint Teresa's visit to the Duchess of Alva. I was once taken to a room of this kind in the house of the Duchess of Alva, where I was commanded by obedience to stay in the course of a journey, at her pressing invitation. When I went in, I was astounded and began to wonder what all this mass of things could be used for. And then I realized that the sight of so many different things might lead one to glorify the Lord. It occurs to me now how useful an experience it was for me to present my purpose. Although I was there for some time, there was so much to be seen and I could not remember it all, so that I could not no more recall what was in those rooms than if I had never seen them. Nor could I say what the things were made of. I can only remember having seen them as a whole. Commentary 9. Saint Teresa used her experience of staying with the Duchess of Alva and seeing her treasure room to explain how the soul can be overwhelmed by the immensity of what it sees. In a rapture, the soul may be able to some degree, recall some things it saw or felt. The experience is so overwhelming to the soul that there is too much to remember, right? It's kind of information overload, or the supernatural way. We're designed to receive supernaturally, but we can't retain everything, so we're used to operating in a worldly manner, where prayer isn't our normal norm of communication, but it should be. So the senses and the faculties get overwhelmed during this time. They may have experienced this all a lot, but they don't remember it all. It's like there's just so much information and stuff there. The detail is so high, the fidelity is so high, we can't retain it all. So the memory can't recall everything individually, but only recalls things as a whole from the experience. Like mine, I remember I got pulled up into heaven or in the 7th mansions where Jesus dwells, and he took me to the armory of my room and pulled out a sword that was prepared for me by him. And there was tons and tons of divine spiritual warriors there who were supposed to assist me during my times, and if things got really nasty, those are the ones that helped me. But I remember an image of it. I can't draw in on the exact details or the size of it, right? It's just, there's some vagueness to it, but I know it existed and I saw it, and I have like a snapshot from that experience. He says there was so much there to retain. And plus your mind's caught off guard. It's like, what I'm looking in heaven, I'm talking to Jesus, what? So the faculty is already caught off guard during the absorption. Like, wow, I'm Jesus, I'm here with him right now. And then he starts showing you all this stuff. You're going, I'm still in infatuation, absorption with Jesus being right in front of me. Hold on here. Number 10, the joy of the soul during raptures. It is just like that here. The soul becomes one with God. It is brought into this mansion of the Imperium heaven, which we must have in the depths of our souls. For it is clear that since our God dwells in them, he must have one of these mansions. And although while the soul is in ecstasy, the Lord will not always wish it to see these secrets, for it is so much absorbed in this fruition of him that great blessing suffices it. He is sometimes pleased that it should emerge from its absorption, and then it will at once see what there is in this room, in which case, after coming to itself, it will remember that revelation of the great things it has seen. It will not, however, be able to describe any of them, nor will its nature be able to apprehend more of the supernatural than God has been pleased to reveal to it. Commentary 10. Teresa explains that during these raptures, we are brought into the highest heaven, in the seventh mansion where Jesus lives within us. Remember, Jesus is indwelling. He's both in the third heavens, at the right-hand side of the Father, and he dwells inside all of us. He is omnipresent. So he dwells in our seventh mansion. That's what Saint Teresa calls it, the interiormost part where Jesus lives. Right? This isn't a New Age explanation or something. This is Saint Teresa doing her best at trying to articulate and put words to what does it look like, and how do we interact in prayer with Jesus who dwells inside of us. You notice she never mentions the courts of heaven. Jesus dwells inside of us. Why do you need to go to the courts of heaven? I'm not going to digress here. Process that. Cut out the middleman. Go to Jesus. Go straight to Jesus. Go to the King whom loves us, our bridegroom. Yeah, we get some wacky stuff here, guys. It just keeps coming out. We keep doing it to ourselves. Oh, here we go. Let's go on. Let's continue. So during the ecstasy, Jesus may not allow the soul to see mysteries. Sometimes he'd be holding stuff back. He doesn't want to show us everything. But he may instead desire that the soul stay in absorption to him. Like, wow, I'm with Jesus. I have a feeling that was my intellectual vision experience at the Basilica, the Immaculate, like I referenced earlier. I have a feeling that was my experience where at that time as a child, I was pulled into the ecstasy. Remember, ecstasy isn't something sexual. We got to stop that. Ecstasy means this spiritual experience with high fidelity that we're pulled in and we're absorbed into Jesus. Mine was an absorption to Jesus. And I think the revelation was that he was real. There was a revelation that came out of it, that he was real. And some other stuff that were beyond words, but I remember the switch was just like that. It was instantaneous. So they're hard to explain, but that's what they look like, man. So after being released from the absorption, Jesus may grant the soul a glimpse of the room where he lives. The soul will retain the revelation of what has seen. Cool, right? So we got an absorption, and then we go into this from the ecstasy, and then we go into this rapture, where it's an intellectual vision. However, we'll not be able to describe it after the experience, nor will the understanding be able to grasp what Jesus has revealed to it. Yep. Back to my chapter 4 outline. We're on outline topic number 4, entitled Enraptured in an Intellectual Vision. That's my title. That's how I describe the next 3 numbers or verses we'll be going through. So I'll encapsulate these 3. So basically what's going on is she's talking about enraptured in an intellectual vision. That's her topic for here. For numbers 11, 12, and 13. Number 11, no imaginary vision. Is this tantamount to an admission on my part that it has really seen something and that this is an imaginary vision? I do not mean that at all, for it is not of imaginary, but of intellectual visions I am treating. Only I have no learning and I'm too stupid. Oh, there she is against her humility. I love her. Oh my God, this lady was brilliant. Let's continue. To explain anything, and I am quite clear that if what I have said so far about this kind of prayer is put correctly, it is not I who have said it. Commentary 11. These are difficult to describe because the imagination is not involved in any way. No words, no pictures, just a manifestation of a deep knowing or understanding. That's right. That's intellectual vision is. It's a deep understanding. Instantaneous. These are difficult to describe because the imagination is not involved in any way. No words, no pictures, just a manifestation of a deep knowing or understanding. That's right. That's intellectual vision is. It's a deep understanding. Instantaneous. Number 12, true and false raptures. My own belief is that if the soul to whom God has given these secrets in its raptures never understands any of them, they proceed not from raptures at all, but from some natural weakness, which is apt to affect people of feeble constitution, such as women. In such case, the spirit, by making a certain effort, can overcome nature and remain in a state of absorption, as I believe I have said when dealing with the prayer of quiet. Commentary 12. Teresa adds that if the soul doesn't receive any mystery or supernatural revelation during the experience, then it is not a true rapture. A false sense of rapture could occur during absorption in the prayer of quiet. So be aware of this, guys. Be aware of this. Remember, we have to police our own backyard, our own mansions. We have to police our own mansions, guys, and the experiences in them. Can't just go off the rails. So saith the Lord, I have an office. Now we're seeing why this is tearing down. It's falling apart. If you have a deep interior prayer life, there's humility. We're such a worm, right? Because it's who we are. And we go to Jesus with total humility. So have you experienced this where you believe you have been graced by a mystical prayer from Jesus, but the effects are too vague and you're left questioning what happened? Has this happened to you? I have. These are called learning experiences. And all of us, that's why we get them. Have you experienced a moment where you believe mystical prayer from Jesus has graced you? However, the effects are too vague and you're left questioning yourself about what happened. Yep. These false experiences are common in our interior prayer life journey. It helps us develop discernment. Oh, there's the D word. We have to be able to discern our own stuff. As you mature, you should be able to start discerning what's real and what's not. It happens to all of us. All of us go through this. I call it being dragged across the asphalt. That's how you develop wisdom in prayer. You got to fall off your bike. It helps us develop discernment by policing our own mystical experiences. You can't just go, oh my God, that was real. That one's real. That one's real. Remember, she says that's kind of like a melancholy, or it's these people aren't really having true experiences. Their fancy is taken over. So if you ever experienced this, leave a comment. If you had an experience where you had to discern that you thought something went one way and it was actually something else. This happens a lot. We have to tear things apart and discern these. Some experiences were real, some weren't. I've had those too. I've had some that were questionable, and I've had some I can't figure out which one fits into rapture or prayer of quiet. I've had that too. Sometimes a lot of it's a mystery, but we have to be able to be mature enough in this walk. Authenticity. Authenticity, guys. Everything. Number 13, revelation of future bliss. Such experiences as these have nothing to do with raptures. For when a person is enraptured, you can be sure that God is taking her entire soul to himself, and that as she is his own property and has now become his bride. He is showing her some little part of the kingdom that she has gained by becoming so. This part may be only a small one, but everything that is in this great God is very great. He will not allow her to be disturbed either by the faculties or the senses. So he at once commands that all the doors of these mansions shall be shut, and only the door of the mansion in which he dwells remains open so that we may enter. Blessed be such great mercy, rightly shall those who will not profit by it, and who thus forego the presence of their Lord, be called accursed. Commentary 13. Saint Teresa is beginning to clarify her biblical references to the bridegroom. She is drawing her language and context from the Canticles, also known as the Song of Solomon in the modern churches. You guys start picking up on this language here? It's coming in. She's using it. For instance, he takes her entire soul to himself. She is his property, and now she is his bride. Right? That's almost like language context coming from the Canticles or the Song of Solomon. How about this one? The bridegroom commands the doors of the mansion shut, which may allude to Matthew 25, the parable of 10 virgins. When the bridegroom came, only the virgins who were prepared were let in, and the door was shut. What does kind of let you know here, too? This kind of tells you how you get your oil. I've always left that several times. I talk about this, or I go and talk in different places about, what do you think the oil is? And I get all these different answers. I think the doctor of the church here, Saint Teresa of Avila in prayer, I think she nailed it for us. This is how we get our oil. It's in the 6 mansions, in our interior prayer life. So is your soul prepared? Do you have your lamp trimmed and the oil for your lamp? Are you waiting for the bridegroom to open the door? Are you ready to step in? Got to ever be ready. Conclusion of the 6 mansions, chapter 4, part 1. We covered numbers 1 through 13. Remember, this covers only the first 4 sections of my outline: courage of the soul and raptures. Number 2, one particular kind of rapture. Number 3, understanding the experience. Number 4, enraptured in an intellectual vision. This is how I broke it down. So recap. Number 1, my outline, courage of the soul and raptures. The courage of the soul to marry up. That's my wife always says, always marry up. A marriage way out of your class to a king. That's what Saint Teresa is talking about. Women, you have the courage to marry up to a king. Not only to a worldly king, but to the King of Heaven, your creator. You're marrying up to the highest possible way. Jesus. 2, one particular kind of rapture. Teresa explained the rapture caused by the spark of love. Jesus gave it to the soul as a sign of his betrothal. During these raptures and ecstasies, the soul and the senses are absorbed into the presence of Jesus. The soul is given revelation of unspeakable mysteries. Outline 3, understand the experience. Teresa used the example of Moses and the burning bush, as well as the supernatural revelation he received, right? So he's talking to Jesus as in a flaming bush. So he's having this exterior vision with his eyes. And he's probably getting an intellectual vision or a revelation download, because he had to. There was a lot of information that had to be conveyed at that one moment to Moses to undertake the chore of helping the Israelites leave Egypt, be delivered by Jesus. Teresa also shared with us the Duchess of Alva and her experience in the treasury. Our soul cannot retain everything that was revealed from Jesus' 7th mansion's rapture experience. Just like St. Teresa said, she couldn't remember everything in the Duchess of Alva's treasury. She couldn't remember everything that came through. It's just so much information, so many things to see. There's an information overload going on. My outline number 4, enraptured in an intellectual vision. So what's happening here at these raptures and ecstasies are not imaginary visions. The soul receives direct revelation that goes deep into the interior of the soul. It's a direct revelation. It happens quickly and instantaneously. There could be a lot of information packed in that thing. A prayer of quiet absorption can be mistaken for a rapture prayer. If there's difficulty discerning the information, the absorption, and most likely a false rapture prayer, she says. So we could have false ones. Discern it. This is how we discern it. It's a wrap. That's all I've got. That's it for part 1 of episode 152. We're going to cover, how do we get to today? We got to numbers 1 through 13. We're going to go 14 through 22 in part 2 to wrap up the 6 mansions chapter 4. And remember to check the show notes where I post my research on episode 152. And that's right down here. You'll see it. Field Guide to Spiritual Warfare.blogspot.com. That's where I post the show notes, and I'll post other things and links to life and everything else I quoted in this today. Always check that. Go back and check there. And if you like the Blessed Ministry, remember these take a while to produce and get information for. I'd love the blessing, guys. Either it's your prayer or you just tell somebody else about us. Go, hey, start listening to Mike. There's some cool stuff out here, some stuff you don't hear anywhere else. And we have our own little gathering room. This is our little house church, right? It's our little house church on the internet, on YouTube and Spotify and Rumble. This is where we're at, guys. It's our little house church, right? We sit here and we'll discuss stuff of the supernatural, and we rein it in. So if you guys like this, go tell your friends about it. Hit the like button, smash the like button, or tell the people about it, or we'd accept blessings too financially. Just go to fieldguidedspiritualwarfare.blogspot.com I mentioned earlier for episode 152. And on the right-hand side, there's a PayPal button. Just click that and it will send a donation. We are 501c3, so you will get, this is tax deductible. And yeah, I'd love it. Appreciate it. If not, if you just listen in for free, I don't care. My whole thing is about edification and knowledge, right? I want to disseminate and share what I got. So it's like, I like some of these comments years and years and years ago when I was going through publishing on a Field Guide Spiritual Warfare, the book, and I put it on the podcast. I was going through the book itself. And somebody goes, all you care about is just selling books. And I go, well, if I cared about that, then why am I going through the book on YouTube, right? Almost verse for verse, or just update it. So it gets funny. It gets interesting, crazy, and sideways and whatever. Gotta love social media and the internet. So that's it for me. It's a wrap. This is the M16 Bishop at the N16 Bunker signing off. God bless you guys. And may you guys go deeper in prayer with Jesus and what you learned here and go back and discern your spiritual experiences, man. Jesus loves you and he's chasing you. The bridegroom. Don't get locked out. Make sure you have your oil and your lamps trimmed. God bless. Amen.